batch client extensions and objects, and what is what we want to talk about. First of all, we have worked in a non-partner company, and I work in a maintenance and project group, and we have to build an object structure for a project that we had a lot of instances in what was a service builder, very complex, and we had to rebuild it in objects. It was at first very rare to see how to merge it all together because there were some dependencies, and all the experience that we have had working on it have been very useful to come to what is this presentation now. We work in a maintenance, and we have something very important to say, that is quality. Quality is very important for us, and quality is never an accident. It is the result of intelligent effort. It's what we're making here. We are trying to learn the best practices and how to make things right. Batch in library, I think most of you know what it is about, but I will make a quick, we will make a little bit of explaining what we have. We have a lot of entities that are working currently in library API, and we can consume them with the batch engine to import and export bulks of data through it. And we have some tools that allow us to work like that. We have the batch engine API on one way, that we can work directly with the batch engine API to import and export everything that we need directly from the batch engine API or through the data migration center. That's a feature flag that you have to activate, but you can activate it in your non-production environments just to export there. We also have the chance to use it through the OSGI modules and also the batch client extension, and that's what we are talking today. First of all, use cases of batch client extension. We can use it to for data integration. With data integration, we can integrate and use it as an ETL system through the file name mapping map. This can allow us to define the entry file name and the exit file name to allow us to export and transform everything that we have to export through the batch client extension. That's a little configuration that we will talk about it later. We can also do an environment setup. That's the use case that we have seen the most. Everyone that has checked the workspace of library, there are a lot of environment setup examples and also in the courses, and just uploading the batch, you will make an environment setup. And you can also make environment maintenance in order to allow us to just update things in our environments without having to do it manually. That's very related to environment setup. And there are many other use cases that you can make. With environment setup and environment changes, we are not talking only on the data that you are importing, but also configurations and other things that you can import through the batch client extensions. How do we create it? That's important. We have a YAML file that we have to add. That's very simple. You can just use an example that we have in the workspaces, and there's not much special apart from using the right names and everything. We have the configuration. That's a bit tricky. We will explain about it in the next slide. And we also have the data that we'll also explore a little bit about it. In the configuration, we have some strategies that we have to configure. And we have the import strategy that we can put it in on error fail. That's just very descriptive because if it encounters an error, it will fail, and the execution of the batch will just stop. We can also make on error continue. That will make the batch to execute everything that it can, and just at the end of all the import tasks have been run, you will have a little array that will explain all the errors that you have. It's a little bit tricky because sometimes you will have a lot more of errors that you should have, because at the end of the day, if you have an error at the beginning that make a cascade of errors later, you will see a lot of errors that maybe it's not that much. You will just solve one thing and everything will run smoothly later. You have also create a strategy that you can insert or upsert. They are very similar. The only difference is that with the insert create a strategy, the batch will fail if it encounters an external reference code that's equal to the one that you're using. And the upsert will just update with the strategy that you have just defined. You can define it with update or partial update. If you define with update, you will have to put all the data, everything that you need to have in that item, because the null values will be just nullified. With the partial update, on the other hand, you can put parts of it, and the null values will just be ignored. That's to make an example of it would be to not have to put the whole entity exported and just the parts that you are interested to update, and make a more reduced batch. In what comes to data extraction, you have some strategies that you can make. The easier one, UI, you can just go there, click the 3 points, export, and you will have the JSON. That's not available for everything, so it's a strategy that will work for most of the cases, but notification templates, for example, don't have UI exports. The Data Migration Center, on the other hand, it's a feature flag, but has most of the, I don't know if now with the CMS there's everything already, but there are most of the options there. You will have to use a configuration of JSON in order to export it for batch client extension. That's important. There's also the headless API that's completely relevant for every entity that you have to export, and probably the most recommended in general in order to export them. And also we'll have, I have to say it, the batch client extension generator that has been presented as a winner of the contest this year. And when you have all of this, you just put it on the JSON, on the items, and everything will be there. And that was easy. Everything looks very easy like that. But well, we know that not everything is a field of roses, not everything is so beautiful, and sometimes you have bad luck, and you will have an error. And that's the problem, that you may have a problem that with an error in a file that contains thousands of lines, and then you have to locate something that is referenced hundreds of times, maybe, depending on the case. And it's difficult to solve all these problems in such big files. And we have some considerations to make too. Import task will be executed sequentially by file name and alphabetical order. So we have to understand that everything that we put in the JSON files will be executed. Every JSON file will be just an import task, and until it ends, the next JSON file will not be run as an import task. So we have to understand that there is an order dependency, and it depends on the file name that we get. Also, external reference codes that are not already created on the same import task might cause an error. The system already has some corrections. We will see one later that in some entities solve it, but there are some other cases that don't solve it. Entities and the functionality of batch are not always the same. So we have to check every entity, how it works, because sometimes you expect them to work all the same, and they don't. Cross dependencies are used to cause errors. So for example, object relationships with many-to-many relationships or circular relationships, we'll start making relationships. You have dependency of objects, and other objects have dependency on the other objects, and that can cause errors in some cases. I talk about object relationships, and there are other cases of relationship commerce or items or other things like that. That's just an example, and many of these things can be approached for any other case apart from objects. Also, any item that can't be created or a part of it might cause an error, or probably will, in fact. What cases do we have? If you don't put all the required fields, if you don't pass a validation rule, there are many cases in which it will fail. So we have to be very careful, especially with object entries or other cases, to add everything that has to be created. Normally, if we export the JSON, it should be already an viable one, but if we try to tune it a little bit, some contents, it could fail. Also, some entities don't have all configurations available. For example, when we talk about object definitions, we have the object definition itself, and we have all the parts like the relationships, the fields, the object actions. All of those don't have, for example, the update strategy. They only have the import strategy. That's what I was talking about earlier. So sometimes you will have to check what do you want to export, because then it will give you some problems in order to import it, because you will have to define one strategy first. And if you are forced to one strategy, sometimes it can limit you in what you can do. And some errors can be hard to solve, because you have seen before an error that has been shown when you are running the batch client extension. But there are a lot of times that you just execute the client extension, you check the log, everything's right, everything's OK. There is no errors. But you then go check, you test it, you see if everything has been created. Not everything is created every time that you execute it. So you have to check a lot if everything has been created. Normally, it goes by types, so it's not like one thing is created, another is not in the same, for example, object entry. But maybe there are some types of object entries that are imported and others that are not. Or if one object entry has some values that have failed, it can give you an error. There are a lot of cases. And everything that you will have to export, all these JSONs, how do we organize them? How do we maintain it? And how do we use it for normally? There are some strategies that you can make in order to use those JSON files and put it in the batch line extension in order to use it for your environments. The simplified strategy, you just, for example, put everything inside an object folder. You export the object folder already, because that's the easy way to create just a big JSON, an enormous JSON, and it's easy to understand because you just have to export it and you just run it. That's great, but it will be difficult to debug because you will have a big file that, if it gives an error, you will have a lot of references very similar, and it will be hard. We thought maybe just a strategy that remembers us of something that we have seen before. Upgrade steps, for example. We are used to it. We just make upgrade steps, and we try to name it also in the same way. And we try to, every time, add new files and never modify the ones that are already done. And you just increment that batch client extension to whatever it takes. It's unlikely to fail because you will be adding every time a little bit of more of things. And if it fails, you know which file are the things that are failing, but it will not escalate well. You will end up with a batch client extension that has to run a lot of import tasks. So that's the one that I would discard. But we were thinking all these things, and I wanted to show it because maybe some of you will think about it and no, discard it. It's not great. And also file names at merge can be very problematic because you will have to check the versioning every time that you merge. And there we thought about single responsibility strategy that every batch file just imports the part that it should be responsible of. And every entity just exports its part, not the parts that it has inside. If we have entities that are related, the data of that entity, we have to add it somewhere else, not in the same file that we are having. It's a little bit harder to create and understand because you have to understand the dependencies that there are. And it is unlikely to fail because you will start partitioning everything into smaller files, and you will see in the logs where it is running OK and when it starts to fail. And it's very easy to debug. And also, it might be possible to automate with some tools that, like what we have seen on the batch client extension generator. In order to see a bit of the best practices, you have to, first of all, understand the dependencies. You will have a lot of dependencies in batch, and it is recommended that you understand all the dependencies that you have. Try to avoid duplication. If you start making a batch and you have duplication of values, then someone else will come later, will try to modify this batch, and if this person doesn't modify the last file that references this entity, you will end up with a batch client extension that in one import task modifies it like it really should, and the next one resets it to what it was originally. And this is a simple example, but if you start making a lot of cases that are not tested and people start making changes freely in the batch client extension, you will end up with a mess. Consider separating by responsibility. That's an idea that we had, that if we separate responsibilities in each import task, we will end up with a solution that doesn't overcomplicate for the batch engine the solving of these dependencies, and we will be solving it manually. Also, name the files with numbered prefix. It's the best solution. You can make it in alphabetical order if you want, but a numbered prefix is the best way to make it. And use an informative naming standard, preferably, and add to each of your batch files a naming that allows you to identify what it is making in that JSON file. Because making everyone generic namings and freely can end up in a batch file that in a batch client extension that has so many files that you don't know what's making in every file. Every time that you can, try to use upsert and partial update if they are available and they work, because they are the most easy to later on deploy later if you have other updates to the batch and you don't have to make the deploy in a void environment, and you can use it for your production environment because it will just add what you need. Also try to avoid manual creation in local environments. That's very important because at the end of the day, you want to have external reference codes with names that you understand. And in some cases, and I hope it gets a solution soon, but you cannot modify the external reference code from the user interface. So it's very important that you try to don't make manual adding any entity in your client environments if you can make it in your local and then export it with a batch there. And use descriptive external reference codes too, because when you have an error, just by the name, you can know what it is, and you don't have to search what that is, and it's a lot easier identify. And also, there are a lot of more of cases for which external reference codes with a naming can be very helpful. And test every change. That's very important, please. It is a lot easier to see the error where it comes when you are testing small steps on everything that you have to do. Because if you make a lot of JSON files with a lot of things, you just try to export it as a batch client extension, and it fails, you don't know where it is failing. And if you are making it step by step, by little steps, you will see where the error comes from, and it will be a lot easier. Sometimes trying to go fast will make you go slower. And check the logs. It's that simple. That's the typical thing that we already do. Another interesting thing, and that's very important, is to separate the batch by business logic. You don't need to have one batch for all the project. If you know that you have some functionalities that are not related entirely, that you can separate in different batches, it will allow you to export that functionality to another project just by migrating that batch. You don't have to have everything in just one batch and just run it, because when you want to export it to another project, you will have to take the parts of it and then try to make it work. And about dependencies that we have talked about it, these are some common object API dependencies. This is just for objects. I have put some of the things that are related to objects, but we could add more even. And if we think about what we have seen this year, you know, everything. We can add here commerce. We can add here the CMS. There are a lot of things that have a lot of dependencies, and every time that it gets a little bigger, you have a lot of dependencies to have an account, and you should try to avoid having a lot of dependencies when you are running the batch. If you try to create, for example, just to explain what it is, an object field, it will have object validation rules, object views, object actions, etc. And for the object fields, for example, you will have to reference some pick list. That's the meaning of the arrows, that maybe they are a little weird to understand, and that's what I wanted to explain. That's just a little example, but you can make it a lot harder. What we have ended up with, that's our example, not the real one, but it is an example of what we ended up like in our project. It is something like that. It is not the best solution, because the best solution would be to make it simpler, maybe. But when we try to make it simpler, it doesn't work. We have a problem with the complexity of our project, maybe, that it comes to a corner case that it hasn't been solved by the batch client, by the batch engine, and it doesn't resolve well the JSON. So we had to partition all the entities into multiple entities that are making it. We have a numbered prefix file names. Each file has an informative name, and we have made data not duplicated. So we have the object folder, but the object folder, for example, doesn't have any folder item inside of it. We just create the object folder with a name and anything else. You just have to delete the folder item. And the same for the object definition with the object relationships, for the validation rules, etc. The pros of executing it like this: it is less likely to fail. You are just adding everything step by step, knowing that every dependency has been solved. And it will make also errors easier to solve. Why? Because when you have an error, it will tell you the class name of the If you are, for example, working with object relationships, it will tell you that it is failing on an object relationship, and it will tell you the class name, and it will also tell you that it is failing with the external reference code of that object definition. And the cons that we have with this idea, and it's the problem that we had, it's that we had to understand where to apply changes. We, at the end, made it the simplest way that we could, and once documented, once understand, it becomes a lot easier. It requires understanding the dependencies, but that's interesting because at the end of the day, you also want every one of your colleagues to understand in that project what is going on. And the bad part, and that's the worst for me, is that because we are making use of some entities that don't have the updates strategy, it can only be deployed once, and that's a big problem. We have also tested the batch line extension generator that has been this year with the same example that I will show you later. It just allows you to select the items to include. In this case, I want to make focus. The items to include are limited to object folder, workflow, pick list, and roles. And this will be interesting because we will see something very special about it. We just make we generate the client extension. It will generate a batch client extension, and it will have everything that we have selected, and it will work. And this is one of the strange cases that not always are solved like that, but we had in this playable character an action that had a notification template that was not in the exported files. And here, the batch engine, in a very good example, it is adding that external reference code, and the name of the external reference code is the name of the template, but it's not making an error. This is a case that is working the finest way that it can work, so I liked it, because we didn't have that luck in our project to have this great example. And I will make you now a little live demo to show you how. Whoops. Here we have. Here we have an empty library. I'll show you. It's going slow. And in this empty library, we will import what we already have created. And then later, I will show you how to export it. It's the easiest way to show you everything and not lose a lot of time. Here we have the object. I'll show you that it is empty now. And we will add just this devcom batch in the sample strategy. This is the simple strategy one. And right now, it is being processed. It starts giving you the logs. As you can see, every one of the files is giving you a batch engine import task. And it has ended. Now we come here, we refresh. And here we have everything created. Here we have even our notification templates in this case, because here we exported them. And everything's running OK. Now, if we want to export it, we have, for example, what we said here. We can just export from the 3 points and export the object folder. And here, for example, also we can export the object definition. There are many ways to export. Also, we can go to our API and go to headless objects and export from here. It is just hiding from me. Yes, they are already here created. I wanted to go to the objects admin to export the objects, but I'm not finding. Down? Okay. Object admin. Oh, thank you very much. And here we have it. We can just take the object actions, object definitions, and for example, let's get the object definitions. This is a way you can even come here and get the idea. Here, just get one. This is a very easy way to export. And you will have the response and you can download it. So it is very easy from here. When you download it, you can just add it to your batch. I'll show you here this one that I've run is this one. It is very simple. This is simpler even than the one that I've showcased before. This is running okay because this is a small example and not the big one that we have, but I wanted to create the different strategies and not compromise our client's data. Here I didn't change the external reference code, so don't use that as a complete example, please. And as you can see, this is a very simple example and we already have 2,000 lines. So imagine it in a very big example, what we can have, it can get a lot bigger than this. So it will not always be solved correctly. And I can show you another case if you want also. I will stop this because it will go faster if I just run another environment. I have another one here for the demo. And we will run another one that will be empty. I have prepared 3 empty environments just to show you how to deploy these batches here. I'll go here to demo 2. And here we have one example that is very interesting because we will see here I wanted to try the example of partial updates in the object definition. And it has all the data equally to the other one that we have seen before. And everything should work the same way and it should work fine. But there's something that is failing here probably with the partial update. And it is not, it will not, you will see, import the relationships and definition and all the other things inside of the object definition. Let's see if this is already working. I will just refresh localhost. Okay. And this should be empty now again. This is a little bit slow to show because it's not much fast. We have here another, okay. We have another clean environment, and now I will deploy this example. In this case, we will see that it will run through the logs. We will see no errors. And it is finishing all the tasks. And it is showing a lot of logs. And it has finished here. And now, okay, we have the fields, but we don't have relationships, nor the actions, nor the layouts. We don't have anything like that. And if you check here in the JSON, we really have them. We have object actions here. Why are they not imported? That's one thing that we should have to try for a little bit longer and see where it is failing. But that's what I want to showcase, that sometimes the problem with batch is that you will try to just import it, but it will not show you any error, and it will not import everything that you expect it to import. So you have to be very careful to test it every time, because it will be the easy way to see where it started going wrong. So that's and there is another example. I think I'm short on time, so I don't. If you want to try the other example, I will. Okay. If you want to try the other example that there is there are 2 examples more to try. You can try them at the code is available here. There is also the example of the batch client extension generator, and I recommend you to try them to test how they run and maybe solve the problem with the almost single responsibility participal example, and try it on batch. It's very interesting. It works very clean when it works very, and it is very useful. And I don't know if any of you have any question. And well, if you don't want to ask it aloud, you can find me and ask me around here. So thank you, everyone.